Some hotels are built to welcome travelers. Others are built to impress them. But this one, perched on a jagged cliff overlooking an unforgiving stretch of ocean, was built for a different purpose entirely. It was created to endure, to stand as a beacon in a place where storms rewrite the horizon, where waves strike rock with the force of memory, where darkness holds its own weight. The story began with an abandoned lighthouse, a relic from an era when sailors relied on flame and hope to survive the night. For decades, the lighthouse had guarded the shoreline, its beam cutting through fog thick enough to swallow ships whole. When technology replaced it, the tower fell silent. Salt chewed at its stones. Winds carved scars into its walls. And yet it remained, unbroken, unyielding, unmoved. A visionary developer saw potential in its isolation. He imagined transforming the old tower into the heart of a coastal retreat, a hotel shaped by resilience rather than luxury. Guests wouldn't simply stay by the ocean. They would inhabit the edge of the world, a place where nature spoke in thunder and spray. To understand why this hotel captured global fascination, we must return to the first day the team explored the site. The path to the lighthouse was narrow, carved precariously along the cliff. Waves shattered against the rock with a force that shook the air. The tower itself leaned subtly inland, as if bracing against centuries of storms. It was beautiful in a way only danger can be. The early plans embraced this raw spectacle. Rooms carved into the cliff, walkways suspended above swirling tides, glass chambers overlooking the endless gray-blue horizon. The idea was not to tame the coast, but to reveal it, to invite people into a landscape shaped by wind, salt, and time. But the coast demanded respect, and it demanded it immediately. The first challenge came with the waves. Their impact against the cliff created vibrations that traveled upward into the tower, shaking stones loose. Engineers measured the forces and realized no standard foundation could guarantee safety. The lighthouse had survived so long only because its original builders understood the sea's rhythm. They had allowed the tower to flex just enough to absorb each blow. When the team tried to reinforce the structure, the tower responded by cracking. Then came the wind, a relentless, bone-deep howl that tore at scaffolding and twisted temporary supports. Tools vanished into the ocean. Workers described the gusts as living creatures, unpredictable and territorial. Any structure attached to the lighthouse had to survive not only weight, but constant aerodynamic assault. Yet the greatest challenge arrived from within. As they began removing debris from the old tower, they discovered that salt water had infiltrated the stone far deeper than expected. The lighthouse was standing, yes, but it was tired. The walls were brittle. The mortar crumbled under pressure. Centuries of storms had etched memories into its core, memories the team could not erase without destroying the tower's identity. Still, hope remained. The lighthouse's foundation, rooted deep into the cliff, was remarkably intact. It had endured everything the ocean had thrown at it. It had stories carved into every weathered line. But the question loomed, could a hotel rise from a structure that refused to change? Could modern comforts coexist with a monument built for survival, not softness? As the waves roared below and winds circled the tower like predators, the team realized they were not just restoring a lighthouse. They were entering a negotiation with a coastline that had never surrendered and never would. The more the team worked, the more the coastline revealed its unforgiving truth. What looked majestic from a distance became merciless up close. Each new test exposed another weakness, another fracture, another reminder that the lighthouse had survived not because it was strong, but because it had learned to bend in ways no blueprint could measure. The first major conflict erupted around the tower's structural integrity. Engineers insisted that the decaying stone had to be replaced with reinforced concrete cores. Without that, they argued, the lighthouse would never support the new hotel's weight. But preservationists on the team pushed back. Replacing the core meant erasing the tower's history, the very identity that made the project meaningful. To them, turning the lighthouse into a hollow replica was worse than letting it fall. Caught between necessity and heritage, the project stalled. As tensions grew, the ocean pressed its own argument. A storm rolled in unexpectedly, a violent collision of wind and tide that slammed against the cliff with such force the scaffolding trembled like a living thing. Workers evacuated, regrouping inland as waves devoured their progress. When they returned the next morning, half the temporary walkways were gone. Salt coated every surface like frost. Tools rusted overnight. A slab of outer stone from the lighthouse had fractured completely. The storm had spoken clearly. Anything built here had survived its wrath. Fear settled into the project. Some insisted they relocate the hotel inland, turning the lighthouse into nothing more than a viewing point. Others proposed abandoning the tower entirely and rebuilding a modern replica farther from danger, but the developer refused. The lighthouse was the soul of the project. Without it, the hotel had no story, only walls. Then another complication surfaced. Hidden deep within the cliff itself, a geotechnical survey revealed dormant fissures running through the rock beneath the lighthouse. They had formed slowly over centuries, widening under each impact of the waves. Though the lighthouse had endured, it had done so by constantly shifting tiny amounts, redistributing its weight with the cliff's subtle movements. Reinforcing it rigidly could cause it crack. Leaving it untouched could cause collapse in a major storm. The structure didn't need strength. It needed adaptability, a trait no modern system was designed to replicate at this scale. The emotional strain deepened as solutions clashed. Engineers argued for full reinforcement. Preservationists pleaded for delicate restoration. The developer, trapped between responsibility and vision, struggled to see a path that honored both safety and identity. The turning point came not from technical models, but from observation. One evening, as tension filled the temporary command station, a junior engineer reviewed footage of the lighthouse during past storms. She noticed something others had missed. The tower did not remain still. It swayed, not visibly but measurably, absorbing impact the way ancient trees bend in violent wind. Its survival depended on that subtle motion, stability through movement. The insight rippled through the team. They could reinforce the lighthouse not by stiffening it, but by designing supports that allowed control flexibility. A hybrid system, modern engineering guided by the tower's own instincts. But implementing such a system required tearing down much of what they had already built. Weeks of work, resources already stretched thin, and trust that this fragile, time-worn tower could teach modern builders how to protect it. Pressure soared, arguments sharpened. Some team members questioned whether the lighthouse should be saved at all. Others felt the project's purpose slipping away with every compromise. Yet beneath the conflict lay a deepening sense of respect for the tower, for the coastline, for the centuries of storms the lighthouse had survived alone. The emotional buildup crested as the team prepared to make the most consequential decision of the entire project. To follow the lighthouse's example and let movement become the foundation of survival, or to risk everything by forcing an old structure into modern expectations it was never meant to bear. The coastline waited, silent but watchful, as if testing whether they had learned how to listen. Once the team acknowledged that the lighthouse survived by bending, not resisting, the project shifted into a new and emotionally charged phase. What lay ahead was not simply an engineering challenge, but a philosophical one. Could they build a modern sanctuary by embracing fragility of a structure that had never asked to be transformed? The argument reached its fiercest point when the proposal for a flexible reinforcement system was officially presented. The system would allow the lighthouse to sway subtly during storms, absorbing the ocean's force rather than opposing it. To engineers, it was a bold, elegant solution. To preservationists, it was respectful. But to some stakeholders, it sounded uncomfortably experimental. They feared guests would sense the movement and panic. They feared lawsuits. They feared the optics of relying on a lighthouse that moves. The debate stretched for days, building toward tension that felt as unrelenting as the waves below. All the while, the coastline offered its own commentary. Storms passed, winds shifted, the sea roared with indifference. Every natural cycle emphasized a truth the team could no longer ignore. The coast was alive, and anything built upon it must behave like something alive too. As arguments churned, an even deeper problem surfaced inside the lighthouse. During a detailed assessment, workers discovered a vertical fracture running through one of the interior support walls. Thin but unsettling. It hadn't been visible before. It hadn't been mentioned in any historical records. It was new, The tower's years of standing still during construction had strained it in ways storms never had. The message was unmistakable. Trying to freeze the lighthouse in place was hurting it. This realization hit the preservationists hardest. They had fought to keep the structure unchanged, to preserve every stone as it had been for generations. Now they saw that their devotion to stillness threatened the very tower they aimed to protect. The emotional atmosphere shifted. Pride softened. Fear deepened. A quiet humility settled over the group. Meanwhile, the developer, usually composed, decisive, and steady, struggled under the weight of the decision. He walked the cliff each night, listening to the wind carve its shape against the rocks. He ran his hand along the lighthouse's worn stones, feeling the grooves left by storms older than any blueprint. He realized he was not building a monument to human ambition. He was building a home for something ancient. The emotional turning point arrived in a storm, not a violent one, but a long, persistent barrage of wind and spray. The team gathered inside the lighthouse to observe how it behaved. They felt the faint, nearly imperceptible sway. They heard the deep, resonant hum of wind funneling through the battered stone. And then they felt something else, a sense of rightness. The lighthouse was not breaking under the storm. It was breathing with it. That moment pierced through every doubt. The lighthouse had already answered the question for them. They simply needed to follow its lead. The next days became a transformation of spirit. Preservationists and engineers worked together, sketching reinforcement concepts inspired by the tower's natural motion. Artisans proposed materials that aged with salt and wind, embracing erosion rather than resisting it. Designers reimagined rooms that glowed softly with stormlight, celebrating the coastline's wild presence rather than hiding it. But even as unity returned, one last challenge loomed. The flexible support system required a daring test, one that could only be performed during a real storm. The team had to choose whether to trust their new direction or retreat into safer, more conventional solutions. The emotional peak stood before them like a wall of darkening clouds. The coastline waited, restless and unyielding, preparing to reveal whether the lighthouse would accept its transformation or reject it entirely. Everything now pointed toward the same question. Had they learned how to endure the storm by moving with it, or would the storm prove that some structures are not meant to change at all? The storm arrived with no hesitation, rising from the horizon like a living thing. Rolling waves crashed against the cliff, sending plumes of spray into the air. Wind spiraled around the lighthouse, rattling metal, whistling through cracks, testing every choice the team had made. This was the moment they had feared, the moment they had prepared for, the moment the coastline would decide whether the Lighthouse Hotel could stand not by defying nature, but by moving with it. Inside the tower, the team gathered in silence. Rain hammered the windows. The ocean roared below. The old lighthouse swayed, not wildly, but with a subtle rhythm, like a seasoned sailor leaning into familiar waves. For the first time, the movement was not a sign of weakness. It was proof of wisdom. The newly installed flexible supports bent with each gust, absorbing shock that would have shattered rigid reinforcements. The interior fracture, once a symbol of looming failure, remained still. Sensors showed that the load was distributing exactly as intended. Softly, fluidly, alive with the storm's pulse. It was working. But the true climax unfolded when the storm reached its peak. A massive wave struck the cliff, sending a tremor through the foundation. Old stones groaned. Spray burst upward in a furious white cloud. The tower tilted slightly, then steadied, settling into the movement with the grace of something that had spent centuries learning the coastline's language. The team held their breath. The lighthouse held its ground. When dawn finally broke, the storm retreated with a sigh. Light spilled across the ocean in muted gold, revealing a tower still standing, still breathing, still refusing to sleep. The flexible supports glistened with frost. The walls, warm but resilient, carried the marks of the night without surrender. The hotel's foundations had proven their truth. Endurance was not the absence of movement. It was a mastery of it. Emotion washed through the team like the returning tide. Some wept quietly. Some simply stood in awe. The developer closed his eyes, feeling the tower's heartbeat through the floor. For the first time, he understood what the lighthouse had been teaching them all along. It was never a symbol of defiance. It was a symbol of devotion, guiding, warning, surviving, enduring, bending always toward a storm rather than away from it. When the Lighthouse Hotel opened months later, guests found a refuge unlike any other. Rooms carved into the cliff vibrated gently during waves, offering a subtle reminder that they were part of something vast and ancient. The lantern room at the tower's top glowed each night, not as a warning for sailors, but as a tribute to those who traveled to the world's edge to feel its heartbeat. Visitors described the experience as grounding, humbling, unforgettable. The lighthouse did not become a monument to human triumph. It became a partnership between architecture and coastline, between past and future, between resilience and surrender. And that is a legacy of the Lighthouse Hotel that refused to sleep, a reminder that strength is not found in stillness, but in the courage to move with the world as it changes. That some storms are not meant to be conquered, but understood, and that even the most weathered structures can shine with new purpose when we learn to trust the wisdom carved into their bones. Sometimes the smallest shift in perspective becomes the beginning of a new future.